In the latest installment of his report into state capture, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo delivers a blistering criticism of the ANC and Parliament for their complicity in the rot that ravaged state-owned enterprises. One particularly stinging passage reads, and I quote here, "South Africans thought that the ANC government was in control of Eskom, but it was not. It had relinquished the control to the Guptas and those people the Guptas wanted. The ANC and the government should be ashamed that this happened under their watch." End quote. Parliament too comes in for severe rebuke, with the Chief Justice questioning its apparent failure to exercise proper oversight over cabinet and leaders of SOEs. His report has triggered an interesting reflection from political analyst Makhosini Mgitywa, who believes that the solution to the problems Zondo highlights may not necessarily lie in changing governing parties, but more in changing the country's electoral system. He joins me this evening now to take that conversation forward. This is what you get when you put out interesting and fascinating thoughts about these situations on social media, Makhosini. Good evening. Thank you for joining me. So just take me through the full extent of your reasoning around what the CJ says. Firstly, let's talk about the role of Parliament. It's not the first time we've been told that Parliament has failed to exercise its oversight. It seems to actually be a trend that comes up from time to time. You have interesting reflections on that aspect.
Good evening, Tulasizwe, and thank you very much for having me. It's all for the love of country. Look, this is my calculus. This is how I see this thing. Let's make an example that many of us will remember, because it was only 2-3 months ago that the ANC suspended a member of parliament, Mervyn Dex. Why was he suspended? He was suspended because of something what other people saw as an attempt to hold the executive accountable, to hold the president accountable. And what happened was the ANC suspended him. It suspended him because it put him in parliament, and he's not in parliament to act against the ANC. So when we have a situation where members of parliament are sent by political parties to parliament, then those members of parliament are accountable to the parties that sent them to parliament. So that's why we had the situation that we had during the Zuma administration, where you had members of parliament being unable or unwilling to hold the executive accountable, because it's the executive that put him there, it's the political party that put him there. So the president of the ANC, who sends members of parliament, ANC members to parliament, is the ANC president, and the same ANC president is the president of the republic. So there's a carrot and stick situation here that members of parliament have to navigate. One, the carrot is that if you behave well, you don't, rock the boat, you might be appointed minister or deputy minister. But if you don't toe the line and the flesh of the executive, you can be suspended. So we are going to have a parliament that is going to continue to be toothless, or at least it's not going to perform the way it's supposed to perform. But if you had a situation, if you had a system of where the constituencies, people elect members of parliament who go and represent them in parliament, those members cannot just be willy-nilly suspended by their political party because they are doing things that the political party doesn't do. They are more accountable to the constituencies that have sent them. If you look in the United States, for instance, if there's a big matter in the Congress or in the Senate, you'll find that members of Senate or members of Congress go back to their constituencies to get a mandate from the electorate that this is the situation, I'm about to vote. How do you want me to vote? But in South Africa, you can never have a situation like that, because members of parliament take orders from the political parties that sent them there. Yeah. So this thing, you can change the ANC and put another political party, you still be dealing with the same problem.
We'll come back to that situation around changing political parties, governing parties, Makhosini, in just a moment. But just sticking with this, we keep getting told that, for instance, for its part, the ANC, we've realized the errors of the past that led to such judgments, the scathing judgments of the Constitutional Court around our failure as Parliament to hold the executive to account. There's unity and renewal now. We are on a path of renewal. But I mean, one of the things that really stood out for me, you mentioned the Mervyn Dirks situation, and I entirely share your reading. Whatever the motives Mervyn Dirks had for his actions, you know, that's one of those debates we can have. But interestingly, there was another scenario where the president himself said, if the Standing Committee on Public Accounts wants me to appear to account on this matter of public monies being used within the ANC, I'm more than happy to do that. The ANC used its majority to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Absolutely. One, you have a president who is a sweet talker. There's no running away from that. I mean, he knows how to sell, anything. You know, he's on top of his game in terms of saying things. And sometimes we forget that he's a politician. But let's take him at his word. Mervyn Dirks remains suspended. Thought was to hold the ANC can talk about renewal and all that. If that renewal is not at branch on the ground, then it remains just a slogan at the top. And we cannot go by what politicians tell us. We have to make sure that we protect our democracy, that members of parliament
Makhosini, the line
represent the people of South Africa, and they hold the executive. Now, members of parliament don't have the. Okay, I can hear you now.
Yes, no, sorry. The line is starting to really let us down in a major way. Let me see if I can quickly then throw in this question before we part ways this evening. Hopefully the line holds. Your reflections, when I saw them, they sent me digging into the archives, and it took me back to January 2003. This is when the Van Zyl-Slabbert Commission of the Elections Task Team, ETT, it was called at the time, came up with, there were two separate recommendations. The majority felt that we needed to go for a mix between constituencies, 300 members elected via the constituency system, and then 100 to do proportional representation to ensure that all the various voices are represented. Why do you believe we've never really taken that conversation forward? Is it time to take it forward now?
Yes, it is time to take it forward. The reason why it has not been taken forward is because members, like the leadership of the ANC, which is in charge, loves the power that the PR system gives them. So they're not going to change it. And now you find a situation where even opposition parties are beginning to like the system because it gives power to party bosses, and everybody likes power. And I think the Van Zyl-Slabbert report was quite correct in that you need to have a hybrid of this constituency system and the proportional representation system. For instance, our neighbors, northwest of us, Botswana, they have the constituency system. You'll find a situation where the ruling party gets 60% of the popular vote, but the percentage of seats that it gets in parliament is 80%. You'll find that you get a smaller party, for instance, like the Botswana Congress Party, it would get, let's say, 12% of the popular vote, but only get one seat. So that is not helping because it sort of disenfranchises voters of smaller parties. So you've got to have an element of proportional representation, but for accountability, because we need a government that is accountable. For accountability, you need to have a constituency system where you have members of parliament that are not accountable to party bosses so much as they are accountable to their own constituencies. And once we can have a situation like that in South Africa, we can see an improvement. If we think that changing political parties, removing the ANC and putting another political party is going to change the system, it isn't going to change. Maybe there may be varying degrees of accountability or non-accountability, but the system of proportional representation does not put government in a situation where it has to be held to account strictly by members of parliament.
Yeah, all right. Thank you for your reflections, Makhosini Mgitywa. And it goes back, many, many years, these reflections around accountability in the system we have currently. You can go back to Ben Churok, for instance, 2011 it was, when he opted to walk out of the chamber instead of being able to vote against that protection of state information bill, which he didn't agree with. And many, many people would say, you heard the conversations around members of parliament don't represent their jackets. Those who vote against the party will be suicide bombers. It's been going on for many, many years, what Makhosini is raising there.